Taking only my valuables, I dash out of the house, sprinting down the bustling streets towards the train station. I race up the station stairs. At the platform, I wait for the train to my hometown, trying to suppress my anxiety. I glance around nervously, unsure if anyone is following me, though I don't even know what I'm running from. I don't understand why I've had to abandon the honeymoon I was eagerly anticipating and am now forced to flee. Yet I trust my husband who told me to run. My name is Megan. I'm an office worker who just turned 30. Despite always feeling like a newcomer, I found myself in a position to teach others before I knew it, leading a busy life. I have a fiancé, Bob, and we're getting married next year. Bob is my colleague at work and 3 years younger. He's so mature and reliable that my colleagues often tease me, saying we can't tell who's older. He's a man who commands trust from superiors and subordinates alike and handles household chores flawlessly. I think he's an ideal partner for marriage, except for one thing. One weekend, we needed to visit my in-laws' house together. As we opened the door to the living room, we saw two women relaxing and sipping tea. "Welcome home, Bob." "Welcome back, Bobby." They greeted him with sparkling smiles, completely ignoring me. Bob sighed. "Why is Catherine here again?" he asked. "Well, Catherine is like a daughter to us, right?" his mother replied. "Right, Mom." "Oh, if I become Bobby's wife, I'll really be your daughter," Catherine chimed in. "Oh, how wonderful," Bob's mother exclaimed. Bob sighed again as my mother-in-law and Catherine started giggling and making a fuss. I felt an overwhelming urge to go home right then and there. Catherine is a neighbor of my in-laws and Bob's childhood friend. They've been close since they were babies up until high school. Catherine has beautiful eyes and a slender figure, and with her expertise in acting cute, she's the type of girl that men can't leave alone. For some reason, she's fixated on Bob, and it started right after Bob told his parents about our engagement. She's been aggressively texting Bob, inviting him out for drinks and whispering things like, "I'll feel sad if you get married, and didn't you propose to me when we were little?" Feeling uneasy about Catherine's assertiveness, I asked Bob if he was interested in his cute childhood friend. He responded with a disgusted face. She juggled 5 guys at once on the soccer team in high school. In college, she only seemed to date men who had girlfriends or wives. I'm too scared to marry a woman with no sense of chastity like that. "Well, you're right," I said. I was taken aback by Catherine's lack of fidelity but relieved to know that Bob was not swayed by her. However, my mother-in-law was on Catherine's side, trying to push me out by flaunting her closeness with Catherine. Apparently, she didn't like me because I'm older than her son, taller, and worked too hard for a woman. She seemed to be unaware of Catherine's wildness and thought that Catherine, who at first glance appeared elegant and obedient, would be easy to handle and boast about as a daughter-in-law. Because of those two, we faced the worst possible experience at our wedding a month later. Unbelievably, Catherine, who wasn't even invited, showed up at the reception wearing a pure white dress, which of course, only the bride is supposed to wear. Although it wasn't as lavish as a bridal gown, the fact that it was white didn't change, and she was the center of attention at the venue in many ways. What was even scarier was that during the reception she had the audacity to sit at the family table where my mother-in-law was. During our slideshow and even during our friends' speeches, I couldn't help but be bothered by her chatting it up with my mother-in-law. When they approached our table at one point, my husband argued with them as he tried to hold back his anger. "Catherine, you weren't invited, and you're wearing a white dress and sitting at the family table. What the heck are you thinking? What are you doing, Mom?" "But it's my childhood friend's wedding. I can't not celebrate it, and white matches my skin the best." "Oh, I agree. The white dress looks really good on your fair skin. You look the best in this venue. I requested the seat because you forgot to prepare it. Don't worry, I'm sharing the meal with her." My husband, unable to contain his frustration, looked down in despair. Looking at my father-in-law, who was at the family table, he had an apologetic look on his face. Although my father-in-law is a decent man, he's weak-willed and probably got bulldozed over by his wife. We had eagerly prepared and looked forward to this day for nearly a year. It's so frustrating. I feel like crying, but if I cry now, it will only please those two. I'm not going to show them my tears. When I raised my face and smiled at Catherine, I saw the corners of her eyes twitch. "Coming to celebrate even though you weren't invited, Catherine. You're really thoughtful of your friends, aren't you?" "Huh," Catherine grimaced. "And it's so nice of you to share half your meal. Please do share half of your favorite filet mignon as well." Oh, my mother-in-law's eyes wandered. Oh, it's almost time for me to change outfits, so please step back. I'm sorry, I'm so busy. I mean, I am the main event, after all. With that said and showing a calm smile, the attendant who was with me said, "Can we please let other people take pictures with the newlyweds? And kindly move them out of our way." I was grateful for her excellent work. Catherine glared at me for a moment with demonic eyes, but then immediately plastered on a cutesy, doll-like smile and laughed. "I'm sorry, I'm not the weak woman who would cry and wail." Thanks to the excellent attendant and the staff, the reception turned out all right. I was exhausted, but aside from those two, I received heartfelt blessings from everyone else and was able to fully appreciate the happiness. We didn't start living together right after our marriage. Since job transfers are announced at the end of the fiscal year, we thought it would be safer to find a new home afterward. So, for our honeymoon trip planned 2 weeks after the wedding, we each planned to leave from our own homes and meet up at the airport. Once we start living together, there will be fewer chances for rendezvous, so I thought it would be fun to do something that feels like we're still dating. The destination for our honeymoon was Italy. My mind was filled with the allure of Italy, especially since it was my first overseas trip. I was thrilled and excited each day leading up to it. However, my excitement was about to be ruined. On the day of the honeymoon, while I nervously opened and closed the suitcase, checking that I hadn't forgotten anything, I got a call from my husband. "Hey, what's up? We're meeting up at 1 p.m., right?" "I'm sorry." "Huh?" Contrary to my easygoing self, my husband screamed in a desperate voice. "We have to cancel the honeymoon. Please don't come to the meetup spot." "What?" "Listen, don't leave the apartment. No, actually, leave right now and go back to your parents' home. Please." "Wait a minute, what's going on?" "I'm sorry, I'll explain later. Just leave right now." Stunned, I stared at the phone after he abruptly disconnected. I had no idea what was going on, but my good mood had suddenly vanished after hearing my husband's frantic tone. Could he possibly be involved in some sort of crime? The mere thought sent chills down my spine. With my legs about to buckle from anxiety, I forced myself to move and decided to return to my parents' home as per my husband's instructions. Naturally, my parents were in a panic. Their daughter, who was supposed to be going on her honeymoon, had come home with a pale face. Given the disgraceful behavior of my mother-in-law at our wedding, they were even more worried. Even if I wanted to explain the situation, I was at a loss because I didn't know why I was there. Then I got a call from an unknown number. I sensed something was not right. It was the police. Fearing that I was indeed involved in a crime, I pressed the answer button with bated breath. The police officer, with a much softer voice than I expected, explained why he had called. "We received a report about a couple of women screaming and banging on your apartment door. They seemed quite agitated, so we took them into custody. The older woman claims to be your mother." "What? Wait, me?" Because I had put the call on speakerphone, my mother, who was listening next to me, let out a bewildered shout. Even the police officer on the other end, hearing my mother's voice, seemed taken aback with a surprised "huh." I was dumbfounded for a moment, but I soon realized who the older woman was. It was my mother-in-law, and I assumed Catherine was with her too. I didn't know why they came to my house on the day of our honeymoon, but I was sure they were the reason my husband was panicking. Our flight was hours ago, and because of these people, our honeymoon was ruined. No Venice, no pizza, no pasta, no tiramisu, no maritazo, all of which I was looking forward to. This is awful, just awful. I'm never forgiving them. My mother was sitting right next to me. "Those people are complete strangers," I stated firmly to the police officer. I heard my mother-in-law screaming from the other end of the phone, but the officer must have sensed something as he smoothly ended the call with, "Thank you for your cooperation." I suspected that my mother-in-law and Catherine came to my apartment with the intention of causing me harm. How crazy is it that they would claim to be my mother when they're in trouble? Several hours passed. My husband showed up at my parents' house late into the night. As I suspected, the ones who were held by the police were my mother-in-law and Catherine. Somehow, they found out that we were meeting at the airport and planned to stop me from going to Italy. Catherine intended to run up to my husband at the airport and lie, saying, "Your wife has run off with another man," planning to comfort my distraught husband and maybe even take my place on our honeymoon to deepen their relationship. Did they really think they could easily take my place right before departure? Wouldn't their lie be exposed when we returned from our honeymoon? What short-sighted thinking, I thought, but their dreadful plan didn't end there. After stopping me, they intended to take me to a man my mother-in-law had chosen. 50-year-old unemployed brother. For that purpose, they had Catherine's cousins waiting in a car, which gave me chills. If this plan had gone through with my mother-in-law's brother and me, and my husband and Catherine, my mother-in-law thought we wouldn't be able to stay as a couple. It was a terrifying plan. How my husband found out about this terrifying plan was thanks to my father-in-law. He happened to overhear my mother-in-law and the others plotting and secretly contacted my husband. My husband was planning to do some work before heading to the airport, so when my father-in-law called, he was still at the office. He immediately called me in a panic. By the time he delegated his work to a colleague and arrived at my apartment, my mother-in-law and the others had already been taken away by the police. After that, he went to the police station with my father-in-law, sorted out various things, and finally managed to get to my parents' house. My husband apologized profusely for the actions of my mother-in-law and the others and for our canceled honeymoon. He did everything he possibly could, and seeing how worn out he had become in just one day, I couldn't bring myself to blame him. But I will never forgive my mother-in-law and Catherine. I will never forgive them, no matter what. From that day on, I switched from defense to offense. First, I demanded compensation for the cost of repairs to my apartment door that they had destroyed, various fees to the management company, and the cancellation fees for the honeymoon. They were enraged, thinking I was hiding, and kicked the door and even hit it with a nearby fire extinguisher. The door was a new high-end one that I had just replaced, so the repair cost was high. I had also splurged on the honeymoon, so everything in total came close to $20,000. Of course, they resisted. It's Bob's fault for not admitting he loves me. All I wanted was your happiness, Bob, my mother-in-law exclaimed. If you're not willing to pay, we're going to court, I responded. Court? Catherine looked horrified. If we go to court, we'll also pursue the fact that you tried to kidnap my wife. The costs on the amount claimed are likely to increase. At the mention of the word court, my mother-in-law began to tremble, and Catherine started to sob. Oh, you forgive me, right? I'm your precious girl, aren't I? Catherine pleaded. I'll never forgive you, my husband said coldly. Catherine let out a small shriek at his icy glare. But I love you so much. It's cool, you love me too, don't you, Bob? There's no way I could love a woman who casually dates 5 guys at once or goes out with a married man. What? What 5 guys? My mother-in-law looked at Catherine in shock. Catherine's face turned pale as she realized her secrets were out in the open. I backed up my husband. You say you love Bob, but you only started saying that after he and I got engaged, right? Even if you're not interested in a man, you suddenly want him when he's someone else's. Catherine's eyes darted around in panic. The mother-in-law glared at her, clearly hitting a nerve. Desperate, Catherine pointed at my mother-in-law and shouted, You're the main culprit. You tried to use me because you didn't like your daughter-in-law. Oh my, you're trying to pin the blame on me, Bob. This woman led me astray. I tried to stop this terrible thing. What? The two began to argue fiercely, nearly grappling with each other. Their previously friendly facade shattered in an instant. What a fragile friendship. In the end, Catherine's parents and my father-in-law intervened, and they decided to split the claim amount exactly in half. Catherine's parents, unaware of their daughter's disgraceful behavior, were very apologetic. We brought in a lawyer and filed a restraining order against both Catherine and my mother-in-law. Despite her tearful refusals, the maliciousness of their plan left no room for forgiveness from either me or my husband. 3 years later, we were living peacefully with our newborn child when a man visited our home. Stylishly dressed in an expensive suit, he introduced himself as Catherine's fiancé. I went to Catherine's parents' house to say hello, and I happened to meet one of her classmates who told me, wasn't she supposed to steal Bob? Hearing Catherine's name for the first time in a long while, my husband facepalmed. The classmate Catherine and her fiancé met must have attended our wedding and witnessed Catherine's disgrace. I thought it was a joke, but I was concerned about Catherine's pale face. I'm sorry, but I had it investigated. You and Catherine were childhood friends, but you're not dating now, are you? Of course not. We've never even dated. When my husband emphatically said this, the fiancé looked relieved. But she might be dating someone other than me. What? The Catherine I knew was the type to date a different guy every day of the week. What? Even though she wasn't invited to our wedding, she showed up wearing a white dress and brazenly sat at the family table. No, no way. If you're going to investigate, you should widen the scope, not just focus on me. All right. Catherine's fiancé responded faintly and then staggered away from our house. They did carry out an investigation, and Catherine's embarrassing history with men came to light. It turns out Catherine's fiancé was the son of a somewhat prominent CEO, and the entire family was furious at Catherine, who had falsely portrayed herself as a chaste woman. Apparently, she had been dating several men while engaged. Not only was the engagement called off, but she is also being sued for damages. If she hadn't let her desire to steal someone else's man ruin our wedding, she might have lived a life of luxury without anyone finding out. Well, her true nature would have been exposed eventually, but this is way too much poetic justice. My mother-in-law seems to be fretting over not being able to meet her first grandchild. She watches with bated breath as my father-in-law cheerfully brings baby supplies over to our house. Several times, baby clothes were sent via my father-in-law, but I sent them back without even looking at them. Catherine was dumped by her fiancé, is drowning in debt, and my mother-in-law is unable to see her beloved son and grandchild. As neighbors, they get into a catfight every time they see each other. The neighbors who witness these ugly disputes are certainly not enjoying it. Hey Megan, how about we visit the Miami Seaquarium on the second day, and on the third day, let's head to Key West. I heard there's the overseas highway. Sounds beautiful. I also want to eat seafood at a Cuban restaurant. I want to swim with the fishies. This year, as our son turns 3, we're finally planning to take the honeymoon we never got to have. Our destination is Florida. The main goal is to show our son dolphins and explore all the local food specialties like Cuban cuisine. We haven't given up on Italy, but we're waiting until our son is a bit older for that adventure. It may be far off in the future, but with my husband, I know we can make it happen. Every day, I feel so content and happy with our little family.